Now, these Supreme Court rulings are history in the making, changing the lives for millions of Americans. This morning, Jimmy Gleason, a professor of political science from UTPA, is here to give us some insight on all of this. So good morning again.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for being with us. So let's get to it. DOMA, what exactly does this mean for Americans?
Well, the Supreme Court's ruling basically says that states have the authority to recognize same-sex marriages, and to the extent that a state recognizes it, then the federal government is obligated to do so as well.
And the main thing is now they have the same rights, perhaps, as heterosexual couples.
Well, certainly if the state grants same-sex couples the ability to be married. Obviously, in a state like Texas, you're not there yet.
Yeah, exactly. But New York, for instance, couples there are definitely celebrating.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that the ruling itself gives hope to gay rights advocates across the country, primarily because this particular Supreme Court is seen as being conservative, and if DOMA is struck down, or at least parts of DOMA are struck down by the conservative court, that bodes very well for the future. And
some lawmakers also spoke about moving on to Section 2 of the DOMA Act. Tell us about that.
Section 2 basically prohibits states, the federal government telling other states that they can't recognize marriages that were same-sex marriages that are granted in other states. For example, it's an interesting question. If someone is married in a same-sex relationship in New York, what is their status when they come to Texas? That particular issue wasn't before the court. Of course, one of the quirks of the law is that the court's only going to answer the questions that are presented to it. That question wasn't presented. There are Democrats in Congress that want to revisit Section 2 and eliminate that particular provisions.
Okay, and let's talk about the voter ID bill, because that definitely centers around us here in the Voting Rights Act. So tell us about that.
Well, basically, the Supreme Court ruling on the Voting Rights Act took Texas out of the necessity to pre-clear every change in their voting laws with the Department of Justice. And Texas had passed a law requiring voter IDs that failed to receive clearance from the Justice Department. Now that that clearance is no longer required, it comes into effect. And the Attorney General said he is going to enforce it.
And this basically means that when you go to the polls, you're going to have to present this voter ID, right, in order to, unless you don't have your driver's license or anything like that.
Right. I mean, you don't have to get a special ID specifically for voting. My understanding is that you can use your driver's license. If you do not have a government-issued picture ID, then there will be one made available to you by DPS.
Okay, lots of good stuff to discuss this morning, and unfortunately we ran out of time, but we hope you can come back and see us so we can discuss them a little further.
It's a pleasure.
All right, thanks so much for being with us. Let's send it over to Victoria.